provided these educational and training opportunities in the form of TMACOG Techs. So if this is the first time you've attended, welcome. If this is not your first time, thanks for coming back. We appreciate it. I wanted to give a little background about myself and then kind of what we have to do today, because I'm new in my role here at TMACOG, but may not be new to many of you. So my name is Rosanna Helsley. I have worked in local government for about 14 years. The last 6.5 of those, I was directly overseeing municipal operations at the village of Swanton. So shout out to my Swanton colleagues that are on this call. I appreciate you coming on. I feel very strongly about public service, and that's why I've dedicated my career to that. But I also feel very strongly about ensuring that the people that are in public service and as well as the community as a whole understand and ensure they know what that public service actually means. So let's flash forward to why we're here today. I've been at TMACOG for about 5 months now. Seems like a lot longer than that, but about 5 months. And I'm bringing the perspective of the practical side of local government to TMACOG Tech. And I thought of stormwater management as a great topic to start off because we all deal with it in local government in some shape or form. The weather has been kind of up and down. The last month, we've had 60-degree weather, and then it snows, and then that snow melts, and where does that water go? So stormwater is really, really important. We envision a more robust TMACOG Tech moving forward, the series as a whole. So if you ever have any topics that you think would be of interest, please just send me an email or give me a call. I'm happy to chat about them. We have some really great panelists that are knowledgeable of a variety of different topics of stormwater management, whether it's the technical, practical, what does that mean to be stormwater, to deal with stormwater, the financial aspect of that, and then really what TMACOG can do and help with our communities. So, few housekeeping notes. If you are able to please leave your camera on, we would love to make this interactive. I think that that's really great that we can offer virtual training opportunities because hopefully you're sitting at your desk and you can just take an hour out of your day as opposed to a couple hours where you have to travel and all of that. But we'd like to make this interactive as possible. But please keep yourself muted if you are able to because we would like to keep this rolling because we want to be conscious of your time, like I said. And we want to keep it to about 60 minutes if we're able to. So please keep your questions to the end. We want to be able to answer all the questions that are posed. But if you are able to either send them in the chat or wait till the end, that would help us expedite the process so we can kind of get you back to the important work that you're doing in your communities. So I'm very excited that you're all here. Like I said, I love public service. I love what we get to do here at TMACOG, and I'm very excited to start this all off. So the panelists will all introduce themselves as they talk at their part of the program. So we'll start it off with Lauren.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Rush, and I run the Stormwater program for the city of Perrysburg. I'm here today to give the perspective of the boots on the ground person that is actively out in the field and handles plan reviews and all kinds of things like that for the city of Perrysburg in terms of stormwater maintenance of the storm system, MS4 requirements, anything like that that you can think of. All right. Are my slides showing up all right? Okay. All right. So first off, I had to make sure that I added in our new city seal. So everybody got a chance to see it. Isn't it beautiful? But since this presentation is about Stormwater 101, the very first thing that we need to talk about is the difference between the storm and the sanitary sewer. This seems like a very simple topic, but a lot of residents and some people in the public sector don't even know that there are two different types of sewer systems. And today we're talking specifically about stormwater. The term only rain in the drain is the main one you want to think about in terms of stormwater. The storm sewer system is composed of your catch basins that you find out in the yard, manholes, piping that goes directly to our waterways untreated. And the only thing that should go in there, rain and snow melt, right? As opposed to the sanitary sewer system, completely different situation. This collects the drains from your home, goes to a wastewater treatment plant, which is then discharged into a body of water. For example, in Perrysburg, our plant is down at Orleans Park and discharges into the Maumee River. So those two systems are separate and should be separate. If they're not, you probably have been asked to separate them at some point or another. In terms of the storm sewer, like I said, rain and snow melt, you do not want a cross connection with the sanitary sewer. That's one of the main things that
What
you need to
team is
make
that
sure
really
that
doing?
waste is not getting into your storm sewer system. There are other things that aren't rain and snow melt that do end up in the storm sewer. And depending on your own municipal codes, you can allow or discourage, depending on what it is. So, hydrant flushing when you're maintaining your water system, that water can go in the storm. Irrigation, sump pumps, downspouts should not go into the storm sewer system directly. The idea is that the water should travel overground and hopefully percolate into the soil so that you don't overwhelm your storm sewer system during a rain event. And then the last one I have on there is vehicle washing. So we're not going to go and tell a bunch of Girl Scouts when they're doing a charity car wash that it's illegal because that seems a little cold, right? um, we do encourage people to take their vehicles to a commercial car wash where they can send the water to the sanitary sewer. The reason I have the green for residential and the red for the vehicle washing is because if it's not residential, say it's a business, you'd prefer to discourage businesses from discharging anything other than rainwater. They should wash their vehicles inside. And quickly on the sanitary side of things, you don't want a cross connection either with your storm sewer system. You don't want infiltration during storm events. You don't want a heavy rain to overload your sanitary sewer and have sanitary sewer or combined sewer overflows. So you want to keep human waste and your interior home drains to the sanitary. And again, no stormwater, irrigation, sump pumps, downspouts. I've also listed pharmaceuticals. You don't want to flush drugs. Our wastewater treatment plants aren't meant to filter those things out, and then they end up in our surface water. We also don't want fats, oils, and grease to clog up the system. Flushable wipes people talk about a lot. They're not really flushable. I mean, everything is flushable, but will it clog up the system at some point? Yes. And one a lot of people don't talk about is hair, as well as personal hygiene products. Hair gets wrapped up in a lot of the system. So the main thing to keep in mind there is the wastewater from the sanitary sewer does eventually discharge to surface waters. So you still don't want to put anything into the sanitary sewer that wouldn't get filtered by that process. So why are we all here? Why do you personally care about stormwater? What brought you to this training today? Is it because you have a care for the environment? Is it because you are in charge of a program and somebody said, hey, you got to take care of stormwater? And you said, oh, no. Okay, how do I do that? Do you see in the news all of the algal blooms that are happening in Lake Erie and know that that's going to affect our whole region, not just environmentally, but economically? Do you care about animals drinking water? And even though the environmental perspective is a human perspective, the planet will be fine no matter what we do to it. We're the ones that hurt ourselves environmentally, the things that we do. But more directly and immediately, if we don't maintain our storm sewer system, these are the things that happen. We can't drive on our roads. Basements flood. We can't get the water away from our property. Here in Perrysburg, we used to be the Great Black Swamp, and none of us would be able to physically live here without the storm sewer system draining these areas. We do prefer to do it as responsibly as possible. We don't want to negatively impact water quality. We still want to help the environment with what we do to drain our properties. But keep in mind, if we don't, there are very expensive implications. And is the other reason you're here because of regulations? Now, they say regulations are written in blood, right? And there's always something that has happened to cause regulations to exist. And in terms of stormwater, like I said, for our region especially, we have a lot that we need to try and manage and take care of so that we have a good, safe, clean place to live. And back in 1972, the Clean Water Act was created to address a lot of our environmental issues. And from the Clean Water Act came the NPDES program on a federal level, which is a nationwide situation that then is delegated down to the states. So the state of Ohio also has an NPDS program standing for the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And these can range from municipalities, making sure that wastewater treatment plants are permitted, that storm sewers are permitted, industrial facilities, all kinds of different industry can be regulated by the NPDS program. And one of which that the state of Ohio hands down is the municipal separate storm sewer system permit. And this started in 1993 with the larger communities in Ohio. They realized that if you own a storm sewer doesn't just encompass the pipes, it is the roadway, your catch basins, the curb, the gutter, any man made channels, your ditches, anything like that is part of your MS4. And they want to make sure that those are maintained, number one, and that the discharges from an MS4 are not going to negatively affect water quality. So, like I said, they started in 93 with the larger municipalities in the state, like Toledo, Columbus, the Cleveland area, Dayton, Cincinnati was able to eliminate themselves from those regulations because they argued that they had more combined sewers than they had sanitary sewers. But they were still grabbed up in the phase 2 permit, which is what the majority of us in Northwest Ohio, if you're regulated and you're not Toledo, that's what you fall under, is the phase 2 stormwater permit. So this is based on the urbanized area that you're in and whether you are or not. I have a map here in the middle that shows what the urbanized areas in the state of Ohio are. But generally, it's areas with less than 100,000 people, and it's a general permit. So there are individual permits for the larger communities, but the smaller communities like Perrysburg, for example, we apply for coverage under a broad permit that the rest of the communities in the state follow. And this doesn't just have to be cities, it can be counties, townships, universities. ODOT is a small MS4 because they have a lot of storm sewer system draining all of the highways. And some of those kind of group together to be permittees with co-permittees. For example, Lucas County and Wood County. There are a lot of different permitted entities, and a lot of those smaller communities work together with the county, and the county holds the permit, and the smaller communities are the co-permittees. So here's a map that Kari will be going over a little bit more later, showing what the jurisdictions in the TMACOG area are and where they fall. The regulated MS4 area is that urbanized area. It's based off the census, and there's a lot of drama with how that's going to be defined in the future, but this is 101. We're not getting into that. And then the member communities, that it's an overlap there. So kind of take a look and see where you might fall. All right. So depending on if you have an MS4 permit or not, if you do, you have to have a stormwater management plan. Some people call it a SWAMP, which makes sense, SWMP. And that stormwater management plan lists out some minimum controls that you have to follow to make sure that pollutants are taken care of in your jurisdiction. So common pollutants, you have your oil, number one. I'm sure a lot of us have seen oil on the ground after all of the rain and snow melt that we've had over the last couple of weeks, coming from vehicles, coming from who knows where. Nutrients, I have pet waste up there, which a lot of people don't think of, but animal waste and human waste both contribute to that category. Sediment is a big one that I'll talk about in a second. Heavy metals, trash is a big one, collecting litter, doing trash cleanups. And road salt is a major pollutant. Once it gets in the water, it never goes away. So the sediment, a lot of nutrients are tied to sediment, and nutrients are what cause the algal blooms that we see in the summertime, our nitrogen, our phosphorus. Those are really bonded to those soil particles. So a good majority of these minimum controls that municipalities have to follow are regarding sediment to keep it in its place so it doesn't end up in the water. Right. So here are the MS4 minimum controls that Ohio EPA came up with for our smaller MS4s. Toledo, for example, still has to follow these same minimum controls, but they have a couple extra. And let's see, we have Public outreach and education, we'll start with that one. So I personally, as part of my job role, will go out and do education programs for the public within the city of Perrysburg, talking about sediment and soil erosion, talking about, that's our Enviroscape model there on the right, and all of the different pollutants that get in our environment and how to take care of them. Making sure that the public has an idea of what to look out for, because a lot of them don't really have a concept of stormwater pollution. A quick shout out to a couple of the programs regionally that are happening. Clear Choices Clean Water, trying to get people to pledge to take these certain efforts like picking up their waste, not fertilizing their lawns as much, volunteering, a lot of different aspects there. It's a great website. You should check it out. And also starting in the last year is a mass media campaign with WTOL that's being head up by the Lucas County Engineer's Office, and trying to put a lot of that information, that public outreach, electronically so that people see it on their phones and commercials on TV to get the message out there. MS4s are required to reach a certain percentage of their population every year. And so this is one of the ways that you can kind of reach those numbers. All right, this is a separate minimum control other than outreach and education, public involvement, getting the public to come to public meetings, pick up trash, rain barrel workshops, storm drain marking, trying to get the public involved in your stormwater management plan as much as possible, physically out there doing things. All right, so after you educate your public, you also want them to be aware of what can happen to stormwater if we don't take care of it. Illicit discharge is probably one of my favorite minimum controls other than outreach and education, because I get to respond to spills that happen on the highway, which is always a little bit exciting. I also get to spend a lot of time outside checking outfalls, like right there in the middle. One of the things you have to do is, if it hasn't rained in 72 hours, give it 3 days, and you still have water coming out of your storm system, where is that coming from? If it hasn't rained and your system drained, is it a cross connection with the sanitary sewer? Is it a spill? Is it irrigation? You have to figure that out. And as you can see on the right picture, we get citizen complaints, because if you see something, you should say something. If you have a stormwater person in your jurisdiction, you want to make sure that people know to call them when they find something. Our fire department and police department call me when people call in complaints of fish kills or discoloration, sheens, all of those different things. Right. So next is construction. If you remember, I said nutrients are tied to sediment. This is something that applies to not just the regulated MS4 community, but any community. If you have development happening, you want to make sure that they are taking into account how much water is coming off of all of that new paved surface, all those roofs. If you're going to increase all of the flow off of a piece of property, is your storm system going to be able to take all of that water? Is it going to overflow? And some communities have, like, for example, we have a 100-year storm requirement. Others have a 25-year storm requirement, but somebody should be looking at those construction plans when they come in, whether it's from the MS4 perspective or from a flooding water quantity perspective, to make sure that those requirements are met. So there are local detention requirements and Ohio EPA construction requirements. And enforcement is part of that too. If whoever is doing the construction isn't doing what they're supposed to do, you have to be able to enforce on them, usually with some type of information in your municipal code. So these are the things that I look for. That's concrete washout dumped into the left catch basin. That's sediment in the road from a lack of perimeter control that you can see in the middle picture, making sure that the dirt is kept on site. Those are all Band-Aids though, and making sure that grass is growing is the #1 tool you can have in making sure that your water stays clean from construction. And then generally, if you are doing it for flood control or water quality, you're left with some kind of structure after construction. This is at our intermediate school where they have these bioswales in the parking lot, and making sure that those things get maintained and are operational to make sure that they are preventing flooding and improving water quality into perpetuity. And the last minimum control, pollution prevention, good housekeeping. This is working directly with your facilities, whether it's your streets department, your sewer department, whatever you might have in your jurisdiction, to make sure that whatever activities they're doing aren't going to negatively impact your stormwater. So a street sweeping program that collects pollutants out of your storm sewer system. Remember, the street is part of the storm sewer system. Anything that ends up on a street with a catch basin ends up in our water. So sweeping the street, collecting leaves, brush, and anything like that you can think of, not applying too much salt. And then my last picture there on the right-hand side is employee training. Say they have a spill. How do you make sure they know what to do when they have a spill to protect the drains? Because say they have a giant spill of either antifreeze or oil or whatever it is, you don't want that going into either sewer system, whether it's an inside drain or an outside drain. So giving them those skills, and employee training once a year is part of the requirements. Like I mentioned, being smart about salt application is something that all municipalities can do. Knowing what the temperature thresholds are, not over applying. That's a big one that, again, we could go further into. And then if you're a regulated community, you have to provide an annual report to Ohio EPA by April 1st of every year to make sure that you're telling them what you did in the last year and that you met your minimum control requirements. And last year it was required to also provide an updated stormwater management plan. That's a living document that you change as the operations that you've chosen to meet these requirements change. You list out in there all the things that you're planning on doing so that you keep yourself honest. So aside from Ohio EPA regulations, I wanted to make sure I also touched on the maintenance of the storm sewer system. Because if you're not a regulated community, this is definitely a must at a minimum. If you own storm drains, please find out in your jurisdiction who is responsible for that. Is it you? Is it the county overall? Is it a different jurisdiction? It can be different in every different place, but these are the things that need to be taken care of no matter where you are. Those post-construction BMPs, those ponds have to be maintained, whether they are publicly owned by an HOA, privately owned by a business owner, they have to be taken care of. Ditch inspection and maintenance, that's a big one because these are our receiving bodies of water, whether it's a stream or a ditch, roadside channel, whatever you want to call that body of water. If it gets blocked up and the water can't flow, that's a problem. But you can also maintain your ditches and streams in a way that you can improve habitat for animals, macroinvertebrates, just improving water quality in the way that you do it by shading your streams, but still allowing water to flow. Again, that's past 101, but street sweeping, cleaning your system. So cleaning out those catch basins, a lot of times they'll get filled with leaves, rocks, trash. You never know, anything that ends up in the street, sucking those out. If you have a vac truck, that's always a great tool for maintaining your storm sewer system. Repairing structures as they break, as they start falling in on themselves. That will happen. You have to be prepared for that. Marking your storm drains, showing these drain to waterways. Don't put anything else in there. Sometimes that simple message on a catch basin is enough to make someone think about it. Litter and log jams, as you can see in that left photo. No matter what you do, no matter how much you try and trap trash, sometimes a windstorm will blow trash out of somebody's toter, even if that's where it started, and it'll end up in a body of water eventually. It's a low point, it flows to one area, and be prepared to clean those up if it's gonna block up your system. And like I said, preserving that habitat if you can while you're doing your maintenance operations. And here's some examples of shooting and vacuuming the catch basin on the right-hand side, and then how expensive it is. If you look at the photo on the left in one of our subdivisions where the pond had to be drained and completely dredged You have to think about where are those things going to go. Um, it's it's a lot, but if you can prevent the sediments getting into those structures initially, you can save yourself a lot of time. All right, and back to the why. It's required by a lot of government agencies. We have some more exciting things coming down the pipe, so to speak, with the Mommy TMDL. If you haven't heard about that, that's going to potentially change a lot of things for our MS4s, our wastewater treatment plants, for a lot of different areas of our jurisdictions to try and help keep Lake Erie clean. Um, that's a total maximum daily load if you don't know the TMDL acronym, because we have too much phosphorus going into the lake and we need to reduce that. And some of these things that I've listed today are ways you can do that. So those requirements may become more stringent because we want to improve water quality. We don't want to smother our macroinvertebrates and disrupt our food chain. I know here in Perrysburg, a lot of our um, economic benefits this time of year rely on the walleye run. And if the walleye run isn't able to happen in the Maumee River because we have extremely polluted the Maumee and there's no areas for the fish to swim up to, we feel that, not just in the fish, but in the visitors. People come from all over the country to visit the walleye run. Flooding and clogged storm lines, you'll get a lot of calls from a lot of residents if you don't maintain your storm sewer system. And we got to maintain our structures. We have a fiscal responsibility to our citizens. They expect us to take care of infrastructure, and we should. And having pride in your community, you want to have a clean, safe place to live. Well, that's the end of my spiel. So now that we know what we need to do, how do we pay for it? Any panelists willing to help me out with that one?
And that's my cue. Thanks, Lauren, and thank you to Rosanna and your team at TMACOG for organizing this event. Stormwater is so important to this area. So thank you all for being here. So my name is Jennifer Harkey. I'm the finance director with the City of Maumee, and I'm going to touch on expenditures for storm and revenue sources for storm. So if we can have the next slide there, Eric. And if you can move to the next one, that'd be great. So why do municipalities need a dedicated stormwater funding source? So as Lauren has indicated, there's a lot involved in stormwater management. So managing your existing storm, identifying the need for new storm lines, construction site review, permits, and reporting. It all costs money. And without a dedicated funding source, that burden falls on the general fund. So next slide. So specifically, what kind of expenditures are there that would be appropriate for stormwater management? So similar to other departments, there's operating costs, capital, and possibly debt cost as well. So next slide, please. So some of you may be incurring stormwater management costs already and you may not realize it. So a position dedicated to stormwater management, that would be obvious to charge that to a stormwater fund. But what about your public service crews? So they spend time cleaning out catch basins with leaf pickup, ditch maintenance, all those items that Lauren touched on already. So some of their wages could certainly be allocated to a stormwater fund if you have the revenue source. For auditing purposes, you would certainly want to document how you determine the allocation for the public service crew wages. So along with personnel costs for operating, there's of course repairs and maintenance expenditures, as well as Lauren indicated, cleaning out your catch basins, repairing those catch basins, identifying lines, identifying if there's an infiltration 3 days after a storm, those sort of things. So along with After operating, then you could identify capital. So next slide. So as well as vehicle and equipment purchases. So if your municipality has a leaf truck, that would be appropriate to charge to a stormwater fund, a street sweeper, a Vector truck. A Vector truck could be used across multiple departments. So depending on your specific situation with your municipality, you might want to allocate some of those costs as well. And then of course, infrastructure costs. So identifying new storm lines where they're needed and separating existing sewers or relining existing sewers. So now how are you going to pay for it? So stormwater revenue. So I have 3 revenue sources listed. So an assessment district, a stormwater utility, or some miscellaneous items. So the first revenue item is an assessment district. So you can certainly, this would be for a specific project. So maybe placing in brand new storm lines in a neighborhood that was unsewered before. So you would certainly need to get a cost for that, identify the specific parcels that would benefit from that project, determine how much the city is going to pick up or how much is going to be passed along to those parcels, determine how long the assessment period would be, and all the general assessment rules like notifying the property owners would apply. You can refer to ORC 727 or your charter for more specific details, but essentially you would go through that whole process and then certify it to the county auditor to place on your property tax duplicate. So the next revenue item would be your stormwater utility. So a stormwater utility, essentially you're establishing a baseline through an equivalent residential unit. So a unit of measurement of the area of impervious square footage of a typical residence. And I do want to point out, this is very specific, entity specific. So there's not a right way or wrong way. There's multiple ways to look at the stormwater utility and calculate the ERU and develop the whole program. But essentially you're establishing a baseline of a measurement of a specific impervious area. And I can go through a few examples here shortly. But the ERU is a baseline for all other impervious area calculations. So once that ERU is calculated, the impervious area is then measured and then calculated from the base of one ERU. And then it's typically would be billed through utility. The stormwater utility through your council, of course. A new fund would need to be created, and you might want to contract with an engineering firm to assist with measuring the impervious area for each parcel, or you could potentially manage it in-house, just depending on your staffing and depending on the amount of parcels that you have. So the examples up here, these are just 2 examples I've had experience with. The one example is your ERU is, one ERU is identified as 3,460 square feet. And this particular one had a $3 charge per ERU. So all residential properties for this entity were charged $3 a month. And then the commercial properties were measured of the impervious area. If it was beyond 3,460 square feet, it was calculated $3 per and then billed monthly. So that first example is a flat rate for residential, regardless of the property size, regardless of the true impervious area. And the next example, there's a unique REU for whether it's a single family home, a duplex, triplex, residential properties, and it also depends on the lot size, an acre, more or less than an acre. And then, so that would be, for that one, the baseline is 2,600 square feet for the impervious area that you would then use to calculate commercial properties. So like I said, there's not a right or wrong way to do that. It's very entity specific. It would depend on your entity size and parcels and makeup. So the next method, you could really look at your financial need. So you would want to essentially work backwards. So I would recommend that you would forecast out your operating costs and capital cost over 5 to 10 years, and sort of work backwards of what do you need to generate to meet your entity's goals. So the first example is very simple: 6,000 residential properties, assuming 1 ERU for each parcel. You would need to bill $13.89 a month for each one of those parcels to generate your $1 million need. The next example, 5,500 residential parcels, 500 commercial, with an average of 7 RUs per property. So you can see the calculation would be $925 a month for that. And those are very, very basic, very simple calculations. Like I said, it's very entity specific. So you would have to look at your needs and then sort of work backwards from there. And when you're developing a stormwater utility from scratch, you would really want to look at, what you could offer sort of stormwater solutions, such as like retention and detention ponds, a discount for stormwater swales. Lauren indicated some green infrastructure, bioswales. So that can be all built into the stormwater utility code, or maybe they're already existing in your existing code. But if we're, our goal as a entity, as an area here in Northwest Ohio, is to improve our water quality as a whole, green infrastructure is a nice option for sure. So next slide. And then this last revenue option is really miscellaneous, and you would have to look at your specific entity to see if it would warrant creating a separate stormwater fund or not. But some miscellaneous revenue sources: stormwater tap fee, storm inspection fee, identifying areas where you're having that infiltration. You can certainly install a flow meter to really measure that that volume coming through when there shouldn't be any volume coming through. And you could work with the entity to help resolve that issue. You can certainly build that specific location as well. And then just some general items to remember: if you are going to establish a new fund, that you'll need approval through the auditor of state to do that. This is all done electronically through your e-services account. I just did this last week, and the next day my fund was approved. Actually, I was surprised at how quickly that was. And a few other reminders. So this is especially relevant for those entities that have had a stormwater utility in place for years and years and years. The technology is available now to look at per impervious area on a per parcel basis. So it could be time to maybe update your current stormwater utility section as well. But for those that are considering a new stormwater utility, there are geospatial engineers that can assist you on a per parcel basis, measuring the impervious area and helping you to determine a charge per ERU. They also look at other entities, surrounding entities, to see what they're charging. They would help with communication, with community engagement with your public and elected officials as well. Then that last item, the Ohio EPA WPCLF loan, that could assist if you have identified some areas of town where residents have their downspouts connected to the system, which Lauren indicated that's illegal to do. So you could offer some low interest loans that way through the WPCLF to residents. So that's another option. Yeah, next slide then. I think that's all I had actually. Was there any questions?
Yeah, I had a question, Jennifer.
Mm-hmm.
This is Dave Weber. You mentioned this ERU. So basically that's for private enterprises to pay for
So
out of their water bill.
yeah, so the
For
ERU,
their
yeah,
amount of impervious surface, correct?
yeah. So you're establishing basically an ERU is a baseline, and it's usually based off the average size of the impervious area on a single family home. So that would be your baseline. So a single family home at 2,600 square feet of impervious area would be charged, I'll just say $10 a month potentially. But then if you have, commercial properties that have 5 times the amount of impervious area, you would take that multiple of 5 times your established ERU to determine their monthly bill.
Okay, so my question is, what happens if the impervious surface is owned by a municipality?
So the municipality would not bill itself, certainly, but they could put in storm lines to manage the storm runoff. And as Lauren indicated, there's other solutions like landscaping and trees that would be required too, or that would assist in stormwater management.
But what if I'm a nonprofit and I would like to remove impervious surfaces from, say, a municipality's land? How do I handle that? Do I go to the city council and say,
Yeah,
your impervious surface, if this was a commercial property, it would be costing thousands of dollars a year. Do you want to pay thousands of dollars to get rid of the impervious surface?
I mean, you could
Otherwise,
certainly.
I don't quite see how municipalities have any incentive to get rid of their own impervious surfaces. And then
Dave, I think I
what
think
about highways? Like what about ODOT? You
Sure.
know,
So I think that gets very specific to each municipality. And one of the things that everyone must ensure is that what one community has in their code, if they're a statutory village or a statutory city, we don't have many of those in Ohio anymore, but they most likely have a charter. Um, every community is going to be different in terms of what they have laid out for their code regulations related to storms. So it's very difficult to say that you should do this or you should do that. You should refer to that city's, like I said, if it's a statutory village, look at their codified ordinances. If they have a charter, look at their charter to see what their requirements would be for stormwater management. Because it would be very difficult for us to say this is the overarching way to do XYZ because it's going to be different in every single community. So thank you very much for your question. I think we'll get with Kari and keep this moving along. Well, and if we have more time for questions at the end. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kari Gerwin. I am the Vice President of our Water Quality Program at TMACOG. And I work with a great staff and many, many great members addressing issues not only of stormwater, but also wastewater, drinking water, watersheds and non-point source issues, as well as agriculture. So today I'm going to talk to you a bit about our stormwater program. When I started at TMACOG over 10 years ago, I was hired to manage our stormwater program. And I did that work up until about a year and a half ago when we hired Eric Kostecki on. If you can see Eric, just maybe Eric, give a little wave so everyone sees your face. And he is now managing our stormwater program and working with our members. So the TMACOG stormwater program is very different from a municipal stormwater program in that we are here solely to assist our members with their stormwater permitting requirements. And we really do just take the lead or take leadership from our members and how we can best support them. Give me 1 second while I advance here. Okay, there we go. So the Stormwater Coalition was formed in response to the EPA regulations that Lauren talked about earlier. In the early 2000s, there really was a recognition among our local governments in the TMACOG area that these new requirements would require significant staff and resources, and that collaboration on these new requirements would benefit everyone in the region. They also recognize that many aspects of these stormwater management programs are best addressed at a regional or watershed level rather than by individual local governments. So in response, we formed the Stormwater Coalition to address all of these issues. And some of the things that we do is, of course, we work on a regional watershed level. We develop common stormwater policies and procedures across the region and provide regional consistency and predictability for developers. So a lot of those policies and procedures that the Stormwater Coalition has developed really do help the development community. And we're also happy to have members of the development community, both engineers and developers at the table. We provide TMACOG staff support to assist with all of this work. And when possible, we identify opportunities to share costs for certain aspects of stormwater programs. All right, so here's a list of our Stormwater Coalition members. Lauren had mentioned earlier that some of our smaller communities are in co-permittee situations with their counties, so those are listed here. And then I've also listed those Stormwater Coalition members who have their own single permits. We also have members who are not regulated MS4s. One of them being the village of Haskins. This village does not meet the permitting threshold, so they're just at the table because they're interested in managing stormwater, and they're also wanting to anticipate what could come down the line if they do come under regulation. And like I've said, we also have the development community at the table. So the Home Builders Association is also a Stormwater Coalition member. So this map should look familiar. Lauren had pulled this up earlier. All of the political boundaries that you see outlined in a color are Stormwater Coalition members. Underlaying those, you can see our urbanized area for the TMACOG region. You'll also notice that there are regulated MS4s that are not TMACOG Stormwater Coalition members. So the map I'm showing here does zoom out on that census urbanized area a bit. I wanted to show most of the area that I think most of the attendees here today are coming from. So most of the communities outlined here in green are under the stormwater permit, the stormwater NPDES permit, but the smaller communities are not. So you might be asking yourself, how do I know if my community needs a permit, or how do I know if my community has an MS4 permit? Well, OEPA will let you know. So they will notify you. If you're located, again, within the urbanized area, likely you should be regulated, but your population also does need to meet a certain size criteria if you're not connected to the main Toledo metropolitan area. So I don't know if I have a pointer here, but some of the smaller outlying communities that are not contiguous with the Toledo metro area may or may not be regulated. Ohio EPA also has other water quality based criteria for making that determination as well. So Lauren already gave a great overview of all of the permitting requirements that your jurisdiction will fall under if you are regulated. So I won't get into the details here, but as she clearly laid out, meeting these requirements really is a heavy lift, and it requires funding and staffing with diverse backgrounds and diverse expertise. So building and operating, maintaining your physical stormwater infrastructure is likely the largest cost, but the staffing infrastructure is also a large component. So you'll need people with engineering and mapping skills, legal expertise. MS4s also need staff to inspect outfalls for illicit discharges and construction sites to ensure that sediment erosion controls are in place. They also need to ensure that long-term maintenance is happening, all the stuff that Lauren went over earlier. But it also requires MS4 permits to establish legal authority to implement these programs. So legal expertise is necessary as well. As Lauren also mentioned, MS4s need staff who are skilled in public outreach, social media to reach those audiences, educational programming. You need to be able to provide required staff training. And you also need to be fairly well versed in water quality impairments for your local watershed. Of course, the Stormwater Program Administration is also pretty intensive as far as record keeping to be prepared in case of an Ohio EPA audit and annual reporting to Ohio EPA as well. So this looks like a lot and it sounds like a lot. And it is. It's a lot for local governments to take on, especially those smaller communities that might have, one or two staff people dedicated to the stormwater program. So kudos to all of them who are able to take on all of this work. But this is also where coordination among other regulated MS4s in our region really plays a critical role. So through the Stormwater Coalition, I've underlined a few of these items here. We're able to address on a collaborative scale and through TMACOG staff support, we're able to address a number of these issues in a collaborative regional basis. So the Stormwater Coalition, we have shortened that to the acronym SWC. We call it SWIC. How can SWIC help? Well, TMACOG offers staff support through the Stormwater Coalition. The Stormwater Coalition is a separate assessment on your normal TMACOG dues or your regular TMACOG dues. So this is all based on the number of parcels that you have in your jurisdiction. So that pays for TMACOG staff support who coordinate this network of regional partners. And we also work with other community partners like the Home Builders Association and other TMACOG members in the development and engineering field as well. We're in some cases able to help coordinate on collaborative permit compliance. One of the great things that we've been able to do is leverage these partnerships to bring in additional funding to the program so that we can offer additional services and develop additional products through the Stormwater program. And I'll give a couple examples of those later. And we also, when we've got people together, we are a common voice for concerns related to the permit. So our members have been able to provide early stakeholder outreach, or I'm sorry, early stakeholder feedback when Ohio EPA is proposing changes to the permit. So I'll run down real quick a few of the programs that we have done in the more recent past. So Lauren had mentioned staff training. Now we don't get out on the ground necessarily in individual jurisdictions and walk through how to clean up a spill. But through the Stormwater Coalition, we were able to bring in some additional funding to create a video series and some shop posters that can be used in your jurisdiction. And they also have quizzes that come along with them so that you can provide this quick snapshot training to your staff and then also provide them with the follow-up real quick testing so that you can show Ohio EPA that your staff have attended this training. Now that certainly doesn't cover all the training that needs to be done, but it's a good starting point. Lauren had also mentioned some of the coordinated educational efforts, one of them being the Clearer Choices Clean Water program. Now this program educates the public and also encourages them to take a pledge. So they can make a pledge to clean up after their pet, to correctly fertilize their lawn, or just to not fertilize their lawn, plant native plants, or volunteer with a local organization. One of the other things that the Stormwater Coalition benefits from is a separate program outside of the Stormwater Coalition called the Student Watershed Watch. This is one of our longest running programs at TMACOG. This program has been getting students out into local streams to collect water quality samples and look at macroinvertebrate communities to make an assessment of their water quality. And we've been doing this for 30 years. So this program, although it's separate from Stormwater Coalition, is it does assist our members in meeting some of their permit requirements for education and outreach. We also try to do a stormwater training about once a year. I think even during COVID, we were able to, I think we only missed 1 year of training with COVID, but these trainings are really targeted at a wide audience. So sometimes we'll have trainings for site plan reviewers. So those folks at your jurisdiction potentially who are reviewing site plans. We've had workshops and training for design engineers, site inspectors, the municipal staff training on good housekeeping. We've done trainings like that in the past. And some of these do offer credits for continuing education credits for professional engineers. We do have a training coming up in May that Eric is coordinating. And this is on long-term maintenance of your stormwater control measures. So your ponds, your bioswales, your rain gardens, any sort of practice that is helping to manage your stormwater. So we'll be making sure to advertise that, and hopefully you'll see that come in your inbox in the next month or so. Lauren had also mentioned that sediment and erosion control and post-construction stormwater management is a huge component of the permit. So this has really been a focus over the last few years to provide regional consistency for developers. So one issue that was identified among our site plan reviewers is that when site plans are submitted to them for review, there just isn't the information provided to really expedite that process and get the projects moving forward. So our members all pulled together over the course of a year and developed these forms that now most jurisdictions, most Stormwater Coalition members are requiring in order to submit site plans. A few years ago, we also developed a really handy flip book that can be used out in the field when you're inspecting construction sites. And also we've gotten this into the hands of folks who are actually doing the work on site. So we don't have any hard copies of those left, but those are available on our website. And then we also offer help as far as program administration. So we have put together model ordinances with our Stormwater Coalition members, developed standard operating procedures. TMACOG staff can come out to your jurisdiction and do a stormwater program review to prepare you for an Ohio EPA audit. And we provide some annual reporting materials. Currently, our focus for this year is on road salts, and I won't get into all the details of this because I see I'm running up to the end of our program today. But this is a great collaborative effort that we're working on with University of Toledo and Partners for Clean Streams. So more information can be found on our website. I put two web addresses up here. The top one provides all sorts of stormwater information and resources. And then the bottom link goes directly to the Stormwater Coalition webpage, and it will show you when we're meeting next and meeting agendas and those sorts of things. So if you're wondering how you can be involved, if you're not already, start thinking about coming to Stormwater Coalition meetings. Stormwater Coalition meets quarterly and discusses all of these topics. Really, though, the driving force behind the Stormwater Coalition is the Stormwater Action Group. This is the technical advisory committee that really does drive the Stormwater Coalition. So this is where most of the work happens with the stormwater program. So I do want to give a huge shout out to our chairs of both of these groups. Lauren, who you heard from earlier, has been the longtime chair of the Stormwater Action Group and is now the vice chair, along with Jay Mosley with Lucas County, of the Stormwater Coalition. So the Stormwater program is where it is today because of her leadership and leadership from others in the region. So it's been wonderful working with them over the last 10 plus years. So if you're interested in popping by any of those meetings, our meeting schedule is on our website, or you can just give us a call and we'll give you more information. With that, I want to make sure you've got our contact information. If you want information about the Stormwater program or Stormwater Coalition, you can reach out to Eric or myself. But it's not just the two of us. We've got a really great staff. Sarah Geyer manages our watersheds and non-point source program. She also works on education initiatives. Matt Kennedy manages our drinking water and wastewater programs. And Ann Nair is our administrative assistant, and she keeps us all in line. So we've got a great team, and you can feel free to reach out to us at any time. And with that, I will hand it back over to Rosanna.
Thank you so very much, Kari. So again, we are running a little bit past 12:30, so I would say maybe 1 or 2 questions, just because I want to be conscious of time. So if anybody has questions, feel free to type it into the chat. And we're happy to talk about questions on the presentations, whether it's technical, whether it's from a financial, or what maybe TMACOG does. If you're like me, you'll probably think of like 10 questions after the presentation ends. And then if that is the case, don't fret. You can feel free to reach out to me. You all have my contact information, and we're happy to answer questions that relate to the presentation. But I will maybe another 30 seconds or so, and then I'll kind of wrap it up.
Is this, are these 3 presentations going to be made available?
Yes, we'll have the recordings. We'll have the recording up, and then we'll have the PowerPoints. We'll work with our communication team and get those all available for you. Maybe it may take a little bit of time to get that all taken into whatever Mike and Alex, our wonderful communication team, need to do in order to get that ready for you all. But that's a good question. Okay, well, with no other questions, again, don't feel free to send it to us if you need them. I just want to say thank you. This is TMACOG Tech was intended to be a very general overview, because if you have realized, or maybe haven't realized, Stormwater could be, a week's session of conferences, hours and hours, about all of the different MCMs and finance related topics and things like that. So we tried to skim the surface just so that you're aware of it. The first thing is to be conscious of what, as a community, you may or may not have to do. As someone who used to have to sign off on MS4 reports, that I strategically decided to do this before April 1st, because that date is like ingrained in my brain as someone who had to sign off on that report every year. So I wanted to get this information out there. So if there was things that you needed for your report or what, hopefully you've been working on that all year, but you can see what TMACOG can do. It is very important to try to ensure the understanding, as I said at the beginning of this. A lot of times new elected officials get elected and they all have their pet projects that they want to do, which is totally understandable. But for many of us who are either in an administrative role or financial role, or people that are boots on the ground, which are some of the most important people in our communities, it's really hard to try to convey to maybe the elected officials that have the authority to approve the ordinances or approve budgets on how important capital planning is. Jen and I can attest, we spent many hours as a team doing those kinds of things to present to council and committees. Just know that TMACOG here is a resource. If we can answer questions for you, we would be happy to do that if it's in our purview. And I just want to say thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you garnered some information from this. Be on the lookout. We'll have a quick survey that I'll send out here later this week. We would appreciate any feedback that you have, but thank you very much for your time. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.